Selected project outcomes and purposes, section 223. Here you have our table of contents. As you see, there is where you are. We are nearly there. The lecture objectives. You should, in this lecture, understand basically how we will determine domains of change and outcomes. Your project cannot be addressing all the domains of change that you have identified as important and pertinent in that particular region. So you have to make a choice on which domains of change and which causality pathways are you going to concentrate. And you will prioritize intervention outputs for these intended outcomes, for this intended domain of change. These are then your interventions. So we will also learn that you have to do this still after you have designed your solution tree. So the step before you have finished your solution tree, you have also addressed and recognized important assumptions, risks, and rationales that you have introduced in your solution tree. And then you are moving forward towards a theory of change tree or theory of change graphic by now isolating the domains of change in which your project wants to concentrate, the pathway of change and all the outcomes corresponding to that path. And then on these paths, you will then choose the project interventions, meaning the outputs that your project is going to produce to unfold change in these pathways. We'll revisit again assumptions and risks related to these project interventions, and also we'll speak about on how to make your theory of change graphic a little bit more reader friendly. There are some criteria, or one could have some standard criteria, general criteria for choosing the domains of change and the outcomes that your project should now concentrate on. The first one, basic one, is that addressing these domains of change and outcomes should respond to your donor's interests. This if you are applying for a call, for a funding call, so you should move inside the framework given by this call, of course. So you will perform this problem tree, solution tree, theory of change graphic, theory of change tree, and then you will concentrate on the more specific part of that theory of change tree that is more in the donor's interests or in your agency interests as well. If you are working for an agency, you also have a results framework from the agency that you have to follow. So you will concentrate on those domains of change that correspond more to the interests of your development agency. It's also important that you choose domains of change and outcomes that fill a gap in development in that particular area, that some domains of change that are still not being addressed by other actors, by other NGOs in that area. And you should choose those also that have high synergies, and where you can collaborate with others. And also, of course, and very important, you should choose domains of change where your institution has a competitive advantage when it regards to others that could be there as well working in development. One last thing, you also should search, like I said before, for synergies. So should search for potentials for partnering. These are 5 main standard criteria that you should have in mind when working in development for choosing the focus of your projects. Some examples for you to understand how could a domain of change being chosen by a certain agency working on a certain area. Selection criteria such as the high synergy with other domains could be expressed when you select domains like on the basis that your theory of change suggests that the combined impact of livestock production and crop production will have greater synergies than the sum of addressing each of those domains of change individually. You would concentrate on addressing both domains of change, improving livestock production and crop production. Addressing the domain fills a gap. Addressing this particular domain of change fills a gap that is still not being addressed by any actor on the field. The theory of change indicates, your theory of change indicates that improved security activity requires education and health initiatives, advocacy, and non-agricultural small businesses development. And then you look at the stakeholder analysis that you've done before, and you see that UNICEF has just launched an intensive project focused on healthcare services and education. The International Development Bank, that you have also addressed in your stakeholder analysis, has just begun to provide microfinance services, but nobody is currently working on improving the extension services. So this would be an entry point for your project, and it would be a good selection of a domain that fills a gap that is still not being addressed by any actor in that area. It is your organization's best competitive advantage, let's say, to work on livestock and crop production. This is why you have chosen that. These are those activities that you are in the position of implementing most successfully. That's why you have chosen that. There is also a very high potential for partnering with other actors, other NGOs. You have, as an NGO yourself, imagine that you have an extensive network of local partners, so that are all working on agriculture and livestock development, so it's quite natural that you choose also these domains of change. And of course, this should be in the interest of the donors that are financing your project. Multi-country and international funding is available for food security and agriculture initiatives, so this could be a good opportunity also to choose those domains of change for you to work on. Imagine, for example, your organization may elect to address the domain of change, improved income, domain of change towards food security. A necessary outcome in the pathway of change for that domain is improved market access, like you can see there, poorer households. If in a proposed project area, your organization knows that, say, the US aid, call it Feed for Future initiative, has been actively trying to improve market access for the past 2 years, look at the gray boxes, the organization would not prioritize this essential outcome of improving market access for your project intervention. Instead, your organization would develop a plan to coordinate with USAID, the program Feed the Future initiative, to coordinate with the efforts of them to track progress on this outcome via continuous discussions with this program without being directly involved in the implementation of actions of activities to improve the markets. But you should be involved, and somehow you should be informed about the changes that are being unfolded by their interventions. The risk of not directly addressing every outcome in a pathway of change is that you must rely on the effectiveness of these other stakeholders' efforts to achieve the domain of change. So you are conscious that your efforts alone will not show a very high impact on improved income, that you really need that also markets be improved by these other actors. So you need to be informed and somehow monitor the other stakeholders' progress on the outcomes that are also of interest for you, for your project. This slide offers an example of how to present a graphic that clearly identifies what outcome a project will or will not address. The pink arrow shapes on the right are outcomes not addressed by your project. For example, you can put them, all of those that are not being addressed by your project, you could give them different geometrical forms so that are quite understandable out of the graphic, that you are not going to understand those. You can use dotted outlines, different shapes, like I said before, or colors to depict these outcomes addressed by other actors. Just be imaginative on the way that you represent that. In the theory of change narrative, you will clearly document the stakeholders who will address other outcomes of domains of change, as well as how the project will know if progress is being made in these areas. Of course, this is a difficult thing for your students exercise, and it's not meant for you to do this in your in this module. This is just for you to have a feeling of the total work burden or volume that is involved in real projects, when they are well managed, you should have information about what other actors are doing that impacts also on the success of your own interventions. Now, very shortly, in a nutshell, some tips for your practical work here when you are selecting your domains of change and your pathways of change with all their respective outcomes. And the criteria, it's a little bit just some summary of what we've spoken about. So the expertise in your group, in your students group, should then simulate your agency's competitive advantage towards certain topics, towards certain domains of change. You should also address and be clear about which other stakeholders may address an outcome that your project is not going to address, is not attempting to directly influence. You should then document these key implications, let's call them also challenges, for your theory of change and project achievements if stakeholders do not make progress of an outcome that they are working on as anticipated. So this can even come into the assumptions that you are bringing into your theory of change. So you can then, to make it more readable, your theory of change model, to make it more readable, as said, you can change the shape and colors of those outcomes that are not going to be addressed by your project, outcomes addressed by third parties. And again, summarizing once more, outcomes that are not addressed by your project, you can clearly document those in the theory of change narrative. You can make references to those. You can also document how your project will know that progress is occurring in this other project, in these other outcomes that are not being addressed by you. And you can discuss, of course, the implications for your achievements, your results, if other stakeholders are also involved in achieving those outcomes that are important for you. So the expected risks that your project is incurring when depending on other projects' achievements. So that's it in a nutshell regarding the choice of domains of change and the pathways of change that your program is going to address. Thank you.